A Song of Relationship Algebra. Does Brandon+Ashara equal anything? By Analyze. R plus L equals J, the idea that John is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, is one of the oldest A Song of Ice and Fire theories out there. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's the Stonehenge of speculations, the dinosaur of A Song of Ice and Fire discussions, the Pac-Man of postulates. But why should Martin include it in his story? Is there more to it? Maybe. Before we dive in deeper, we should start with an obvious question. Is there any reason to believe it's even true? Well, in the show it certainly is. In fact, it has been confirmed both through unofficial channels, specifically a leaked family tree, and official channels, including the episodes themselves. But does that mean it's the same in the books? In the books, two very different narratives are put forward from the start. The ever-reliable master storyteller Viserys told Daenerys that Rhaegar and Lyanna ran off together, while gruff Stormlord Robert Baratheon thinks it was more of a grab-and-rape. Ned Stark, as in the show, is quite the honorable chap who seems unlikely to cheat on someone. Lyanna was found on a bed of blood, which seems to fit the scene of a birth, yet there's never any mention of a baby. She told Ned to promise her something, yet we don't know what. And if there's anyone the honorable Ned Stark might lie for, it's his family. We don't know who Jon's mother actually is, and Ned reacts very negatively when people try to pry it out of him, something which fits if it reminds him of the death of his sister, and could result in Robert killing the child. Robert was also reportedly relieved, and even got into an argument with Ned Stark about the Lannisters killing the Targaryen heirs of Prince Rhaegar when they took King's Landing, an argument Ned was on the "don't kill children" side of. All put together, many people think this is very good evidence for Jon being the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. Nevertheless, prominent A Song of Ice and Fire YouTuber, Preston Jacobs, does not seem to think so. In his 3-part video series, Tower Tower Joy Joy, he explains at length how he instead believes R plus L equals D, Daenerys, and how Jon is the child of Brandon+Ashara instead. If you want to know the details of that, I recommend you watch his video series on it. But the main reason I bring it up is because this made me wonder. Why would Martin include such a twist? What does it matter if Jon is the child of Brandon+Ashara, except to add more complexity to an already complex political situation? Why would it matter if Daenerys is the child of Rhaegar and Lyanna? Wouldn't that just give her an even better, albeit still contested, claim to the throne? At least, if they were married. At best, such a theory means Daenerys becomes a bastard, and that Jon either stays a bastard or becomes heir to Starfall. The first, pretty earth-shaking. The second, not so much. And these revelations don't mirror each other either. And as Preston himself points out, Jon and Dany are parallel characters. And what questions do they bring up? Should a bastard sit the throne? Should Jon get Starfall? Not really much fertile ground for exploring. But you know how there could be a big twist in both of their character arcs? How they could mirror each other perfectly? How a twist could be thematically impactful. R plus L equals J combined with B plus A equals D. Jon Snow has thought of himself as a bastard all his life, as someone who'd never have anything handed to him, who had no lands or rights but to be scoffed at, who had no title but bastard, and this made him, over the course of the books, quite the go-getter. This attitude, this knowledge, propelled him into a situation where he had to make his own way. If he ever wanted to take the lead, he would have to prove his merit. He would have to rise through the ranks himself. I think this is a key element to what Martin might consider makes a good king. As Varys opines in the final chapter of A Dance with Dragons, a king who's grown up knowing he'll be king sees it as his birthright, as simply an inherent part of himself. They rule only because they were born in the right family, not because they had to work for it. Jon, on the other hand, has had to work for it. He has had to sacrifice for it. First Ygritte, and then his own life. Jon has learned the lessons and done the legwork. He understands what it's like at the bottom, and he understands what it's like at the top. Him suddenly being revealed as a claimant to the throne, provided Rhaegar and Lyanna were married on the Isle of Faces, would be intriguing in this regard, because he might well be the most suited claimant out there. In addition, it would emphasize once again that succession is messy, a strong theme throughout the Song of Ice and Fire books, because Rhaegar was still married to Elia Martell at the time. Can someone from a polygamous marriage inherit the throne? Is such a marriage even official? Some will likely say yes. Some will likely say no. And does it even matter? So what does this mean for Dany? Well, if R plus L equals J and B plus A equals D are correct, then the sudden realization of Jon that he has a birthright would be a strong contrast to Dany's sudden loss of it. Dany often talks about her birthright, you might have noticed. about how she was meant to rule the Seven Kingdoms. Her entire personality for many books has formed around it, around the idea of learning to rule and then coming home to claim a rightful throne. But why does she even want this? The answer is simple: Viserys. Dany's brother affected her in many ways. He taught her about dragons, but he gave her her first taste of cruelty. He protected her, yet he sold her like a slave to a Dothraki horse lord to rape. But perhaps most importantly of all, he inundated her with the idea that Westeros was their home, that a Targaryen ought to sit the throne again, that Targaryens were made to rule, that they have a duty to rule. Now, obviously, big narcissist that he is, he was talking about himself, but it seems to me that this is a message that really stuck with Dany, because throughout the rest of the series we see Dany chase this dream. But is that what she really wants? I, like many others, don't think so. That was Viserys' dream. What she's always wanted instead is home, the house with the red door. So I think it's fairly clear what B+A=D revelation would accomplish here. The revelation that Dany never had a claim to the throne would shake everything up completely. It would undermine the entirety of the identity she's built up over the last few books. The idea that she should sit the Iron Throne because it is her birthright would be bowled over. She'd have to question it. Question her right to rule. A very important question within Martin's work. Have to question whether she even wants it. Or maybe, now that she has no claim hanging over her anymore, whether she'd prefer to return to the house with the red door instead. Maybe Daenerys won't end up on the Iron Throne as victorious queen. Maybe she'll realize that this right to rule has been nothing but a burden. Maybe she'll end up running barefoot through the gardens of Dorne, smelling the scent of lemons, and having dinner in the house with the red door. And maybe that's a much happier ending for her. Or maybe she'll resist it, be unable to accept losing what she's been aiming for, fighting for all those years, refuse to accept that she has no right to rule, and try to grasp onto power by whatever means she can, silencing any who oppose her or dare to suggest she cannot rule. Maybe she'll become a tyrant. What evidence is there of this? We know that Brandon was quite the charming ladies' man. We also know, courtesy of Barristan, that someone dishonored Ashara at the Harrenhal tourney, and he then wonders if he'd unhorsed Rhaegar and crowned Ashara queen, whether she would have looked to him instead of Stark. A line which is quite deliberately left vague, and since Ned seems the obvious choice, Brandon seems most likely, and it's entirely plausible that they could have had a rendezvous that day. It would also explain, in part, why Ned is so averse to killing Daenerys. He's never been a fan of killing children, as was well established, but he even almost abandons Robert to his fate for it. Robert, his best friend. He thinks about her all the time. If she was the child of his brother and his former love, it's no surprise that he would do this. It might also explain Ashara's suicide. As we know, Ashara Dane killed herself. The reason for this is not explicitly given, though several characters have different theories on it. That it was because of her brother's death, that it was because Ned broke her heart. But maybe, instead of any of those things, it was because she was forced to give up her child, the last remaining part she had of the man, Brandon, she loved. On top of this, I, like many people, have theorized that the house with the red door is most likely in Dorne. This is mostly due to the fact that Daenerys specifically mentions a lemon tree, something that people in the story specifically point out isn't found in Braavos, where she believes the house with the red door can be found, during a delightful conversation in the Winds of Winter chapter, Mercy. "7 hells this place is damp," she heard the guard complain. "I'm chilled to the bones. Where are the bloody orange trees? I've always heard there were orange trees in the Free Cities, lemons and limes, pomegranates, hot peppers, warm nights, girls with bare bellies. Where are the bare-bellied girls, I ask you?" "Down in Lice and Mere and Old Volantis," the other guard replied. He was an older man, big-bellied and grizzled. "I went to Lice with Lord Tywin once, when he was hand to Eris. Braavos is north of King's Landing, fool. Can't you read a bloody map?" So, no lemon trees in Braavos. Probably. But you know where there are a great many lemon trees? Dorne, where Starfall is. Dorne, where Ashara lived. If Dany was Ashara's child, then it would make perfect sense for her to remain in Dorne for a period, before finally being shipped off to live with Viserys. Most importantly, unlike Preston's R+L=D and B+A=J theory, this little bit of Westerosi algebra is the only one which offers both a big twist in the lives of both characters and means delving into the deepest questions of A Song of Ice and Fire. What makes someone a good king? and what gives one the right to rule. I'm probably wrong about half of the... Actually, fuck that. I'm completely right and you all fucking know it.